Hey everyone, we're just gonna give it another minute or two to give attendees some time to log in. We've got close to 400 people registered for this, and the numbers are going up. So just give us a couple of minutes. Okay, so I think we are at a good starting point. Thank you everyone for logging into today's webinar, which is Asset Management Planning and the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So this webinar is presented by EPA's Office of Wastewater Management, and I'm Franny Josephs with EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Fund. I'll be moderating today's webinar for you, and I'm happy to say that we've got just under 400 people registered for this, and I can see by my attendee list that there is now 208 people signed in, and I'm sure 210 now. The number is going to keep going up. So with that, today we're going to discuss the components of asset management plans, how state CWSRF programs like Florida and New Hampshire, who are signed in as speakers, are implementing and running them, and various incentives that borrowers receive for funding projects that include asset management plans. So just before we get to our presentations, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items since this is a new platform that we're using. I'm not sure how many of you out there have ever used GoToWebinar, but it seems to be pretty good. But as an attendee, you're automatically placed on mute and in listen-only mode for the entire time of the webinar platform. But there are other ways to communicate with us. We've got a Q&A session at the end of the presentations where we're going to ask questions to presenters. And we ask that you try and save your questions for New Hampshire and Florida until the end of the Q&A. And so we'll make things flow a little better and they'll be able to assist you then without any interruptions. To ask a question, simply type your question in the questions box and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. But since we've got so many people logging into this, not all the questions will be answered, we don't think, depending on how many come in. But feel free to contact us at the end of the webinar. We can answer your questions for you, and that speaker information is going to be available on the last slide. So if you have any technical issues, type those in at any time to the question pod and GoToWebinar, and Allison Souders or I will be able to start a private conversation with you to clear any of the issues that you might have. To answer a poll question, which will be coming up shortly, you're going to select the radio button with your response when the poll comes up, and the results will be shared with you after the audience has had a chance to answer them. And lastly, we'd like to remind you that the views and materials presented by our speakers today are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the EPA. Okay, so now we are going to get to the poll question. And the first poll question is, we want to know who's participating in this webinar. So I'm going to give it about a minute for the results to come in. So far, we've got mostly state government people logged into this. Private sector, about 14%. Up, changing a little bit, 13% local county government, 7% other. And we've got 4% other federal government agency. Now we can share that with you guys. All right, so it looks like we do. We've got more state people logged into this, with the remainder other federal agency, local government, private sector. Great. Okay, now the next poll question, how familiar are you with the CWSRF? Let's see what we get here. Looks like a lot of you, at least half, work with the CWSRF very closely or manage one. Some of you have used the CWSRF to fund projects, heard about us, but want to know more. Let's see. Give it another few seconds here. Got 5 more seconds. Get everybody to vote. All right, you can share that. So that's what we've got. About half of you work with the CWSRF or very closely with one, and the rest of you have heard about us, but want to learn more. This is great. Okay. All right then. Okay. So before I switch to our first speaker, I'd like to let you know a little bit about what the CWSRF is all about. So the CWSRF is a low-cost source of funding for a wide range of water quality projects. Each state in Puerto Rico has an SRF program. The EPA awards capitalization grants to state programs each year, and the states contribute 20% state match. With these funds, the state programs make low-interest loans to eligible assistance recipients. The recipients can repay the loans, and the loan repayments are recycled back into the program to fund additional water quality projects. The state programs have lots of flexibility, where they can set specific loan terms, including interest rates from 0% to market rate, and repayment periods up to 30 years. When appropriate, the CWSRF can provide extended term financing beyond 30 years by purchasing or refinancing municipal debt obligations. State programs are responsible for selecting and funding projects and have flexibility to target resources for their particular environmental needs. Over the life of the program, the CWSRF has provided over $138 billion in assistance to projects, and in FY19, made over 1,604 loans that provided $6.2 billion in affordable funding to communities of all sizes. So as you can see on this slide, the majority of this funding has been provided to traditional wastewater infrastructure projects, including secondary and advanced treatment. The CWSRF has 12 statutory project eligibilities that allow the program to fund many different kinds of projects. These include construction of publicly owned treatment works, decentralized wastewater treatment, stormwater management, water and energy efficiency projects, and much more. The SRF can also fund capital projects as well as planning and design. However, we're not able to fund ongoing operations and maintenance activities. Okay, one moment, please. The CWSRF program offers substantial savings to borrowers with low interest rates that are comparable to receiving a partial grant combined with a market rate loan. For instance, a borrower with a 20-year loan, when the market rate is 6%, a 3% CWSRF loan to a $100,000 project is equal to receiving a $23,000 grant and getting a loan for $77,000 at market rate. With a 30-year loan, the savings is even greater. I see we have some questions. If you can just give us a second, please. Okay. So in the SRF program, repayment funds do not need to come from the project itself. Assistant recipients have the flexibility to assess income from many sources to repay SRF loans. For example, borrowers who take out a loan for a wetland restoration project can pay it back through revenue from hunting and fishing licenses. And a nonprofit organization could repay a loan using membership dues. So there's a great deal of flexibility, and I encourage you to think creatively about where you or your stakeholders could generate revenue to repay an SRF loan. Alrighty, so we're going to get to a couple of more poll questions in a moment. All right, and this is going to be leading us into our section on asset management and state initiatives. I see that a couple of you are having trouble answering some of the poll questions. We're going to be able to address that at the end of the webinar. I'm sorry about that technical issue, and we can actually we can send you the poll questions at the end of the webinar so that you will have a chance to answer them. I'm just looking at the rest of these questions here. Okay. I think everything else is under control. Okay. So now for our next poll question. How familiar are you with asset management plans? I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds at least to respond to this. See, a lot of you are familiar with them, but you want to learn more. Some of you have never worked with one or even seen one, so I'm really glad you're signed in today. Let's see. And some of you are using them to improve your projects, which is great. Okay. Let's give a few more seconds here so we can give everyone a chance to vote. Okay. I'm going to share these responses with you. So about half of you are familiar with them, a little more than half, but you want to learn more. And a lot of you have not worked with them either, and some of you are still using them to improve your project. Okay. Now we have our final poll question. How familiar are you with any state CWSRF initiatives or activities towards asset management? So for this question, it's basically directed to those of you that work for EPA or state SRF offices, or if you're a borrower of the SRF. Just going to launch this for you. So initiatives could mean offering incentives to borrowers, like a lower interest rate on a loan, providing training or planning requirements to them, marketing and outreach, and there's more too that we can get to later. So let's see what's coming in. We've got half of you being somewhat familiar, and about a quarter of you don't know if your state works with them or has them. 20% of you are very familiar so far. Let's give it a few more seconds here and give everyone a chance. All right. Here we go. So we've got about half of you somewhat familiar, about a quarter of you aren't sure if your state has initiatives, and about 20% of you, a little more, 21% are very familiar, 6% other, which means you're probably from another sector, but we'll see. Okay. So now we can talk a little bit about asset management. Asset management helps to plant the foundation for understanding near and long-term operational and capital needs, while making infrastructure-related expenses and future investment needs easier to understand for financial planning processes. EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Fund is certainly a source of financing for wastewater utilities asset management planning efforts and capital investment. So asset management practices require this development of detailed asset inventories, tracking O&M tasks, and developing capital improvement plans. So while these practices are often done individually, they work very well together when organized into an asset management plan. The complexity of asset management plans are not always similar, but plans commonly include asset lists or maps that keep track of age, location, condition, criticality, and remaining useful life of assets. O&M strategies with standard and emergency operating procedures, as well as the schedule and cost of routine, preventative and deferred maintenance of assets. Capital improvement planning that helps to determine short-term and long-term asset rehabilitation and replacement projections that come from asset inventory, O&M data, and alternative strategies. And staffing strategies and measurable level of service goals. So, and with that, we can move on to the next part of our presentation that focuses on what some of our states are doing relative to asset management, because not all of them are going to do the same as the other. Our first speaker is Sharon Knoll from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Okay, we are going to hand control over to Sharon. In just a moment. Sharon Knoll has been working with the New Hampshire wastewater treatment plants for over 20 years. Ms. Knoll is the manager of the Planning, Protection, and Assistance section with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Wastewater Engineering Bureau. In this position, Ms. Knoll is managing their effort to help wastewater treatment plants become more sustainable through improved energy efficiency, asset management program development, and flood resiliency awareness. This work has included design standard rule changes, trainings, technical assistance, funding program development, and many other outreach efforts. To move the asset management work forward, Ms. Null teamed up with the New Hampshire CWSRF to develop a loan forgiveness program and asset management guidance for both wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. She's part of New Hampshire's Department of Environmental Services Water Infrastructure Asset Management Team and encompasses drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. This team works closely to bring consistent messages and trainings to our communities relative to asset management for their water infrastructure. So take it away, Sharon.
Thank you, Franny. With that introduction, I can get started right into my presentation. So our overarching goal for asset management in New Hampshire is to work together to help communities develop asset management programs for all their wastewater or all their water infrastructure, including drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. We are encouraging New Hampshire communities to build an expandable asset management tool to serve their community. We're already starting to see our most proactive communities expand their asset management programs to many other departments, such as police, fire, library, parks, just to name a few. While I'll focus today on the work that we're doing specifically with wastewater and stormwater assets, since this is a Clean Water SRF presentation, I wanted to mention that we do work in close collaboration with our drinking water asset management staff as well. We have a solid asset management team, and we work closely to deliver a unified and consistent asset management message to New Hampshire communities. Although we started out really focusing on just drinking water and wastewater assets, we quickly learned many of the benefits of bringing the municipal stormwater staff to the table. Some of these benefits included improved communication between road agents, road crews, and the water sewer department, improved scheduling of road paving projects to allow time for water and sewer projects to be designed, funded, and constructed in conjunction with the road project, more cost-effective use of taxpayer dollars, and reduced service interruptions, just to name a few of the benefits. We refer to this as bridging the silos. We're working on this within the water division at DES, but we also encourage our communities we work with to do the same. Silos of people with expertise is not a bad thing, as long as there is communication or bridges between those silos. As you probably know, the federal government added a fiscal sustainability plan or FSP requirement to all Clean Water SRF loans. However, the FSP requirement only covers the funded assets. So the FSP requirement has limited impact, especially for small projects. We wanted the New Hampshire Asset Management Program to lay a foundation for changing how New Hampshire utilities manage all of their water infrastructure assets into the future. As I will show you in the next few slides, in New Hampshire, we believe that we've made much more progress moving our asset management program forward using carrots in the form of grants for drinking water, loan forgiveness for wastewater and stormwater, than we could ever have hoped to do using enforcement sticks or requirements. So far, not surprisingly, we're seeing the most success with asset management in communities with strong buy-in from both management and staff, and they really respond to these carrots. The big carrot we've been using is financial assistance, a funded non-mandate. Everyone loves those. In New Hampshire, being a small state is an advantage. We have 135 communities in New Hampshire with wastewater infrastructure, either wastewater treatment and collection or just collection. We've set our loan, there's some background noise. We've set our loan forgiveness amounts available for each sewered community based on the system size and complexity, with available funding ranging from $30,000 to the small systems up to $150,000 for the larger, more complex systems. For stormwater, the universe of assets needing management is much larger and largely unknown. all 234 communities in New Hampshire likely have some type of stormwater infrastructure that would benefit from asset management. For this reason, at this time, we've limited the maximum amount of loan forgiveness per municipality to $30,000. And one more carrot of sorts that we found to be very successful in is our dedicated staff's willingness to educate our communities through workshops and conferences, but also, and probably more importantly, through one-on-one education with the leadership in each community. This one-on-one education and involvement with the asset management program development allows us to assist communities in developing asset management programs that capture the unique nature of each community. When we started the Clean Water SRF Loan Forgiveness Program in 2013, we developed a guidance document to set minimum requirements that had to be met to qualify for the loan forgiveness. Each year, our asset management team would review and update this guidance document. And in this way, we can incorporate lessons that were learned during the previous year. The minimum requirements in this guidance document exceed the FSP requirements. Also, as long as the asset management program is continuing to be used as a decision-making tool and is maintained and kept up to date, it can also meet the FSP requirements in future loans as well. We're currently working through the details of how we will confirm that the asset management programs previously funded through loan forgiveness are still being used and updated so that we can certify the FSP requirement has been met. Our guidance document includes all the typical core elements of asset management: asset inventory, level of service, critical assets, life cycle cost analysis, and funding strategy, as well as FSP specific items such as water and energy conservation measures. We also included items that will help build on those core elements. The requirements can basically be broken down into two main functions: providing or improving communication among all stakeholder groups and providing data. The data feeds the communication. The guidance document requires New Hampshire DES attendance at a minimum of 3 meetings during the asset management program development. For each new asset management project, we hold a kickoff meeting with community staff and management, the consultant if there is one, and DES staff. During this meeting, we review the work scope and the guidance document requirements they need to meet in order to maintain their loan forgiveness eligibility. We also typically talk about software options and needs at this meeting, giving them a better understanding of the options available. The second of the 3 meetings is a level of service workshop. This workshop approach to developing community-specific level of service goals came about from watching what was working, what wasn't working so well in these asset management projects. The level of service workshop is intended to stimulate discussion about what is important in each community as they work to develop both internal and external level of service goals. We encourage communities to invite their users to the workshops so that they can hear what is actually important to the users of the system instead of just making those assumptions. However, if user participation is not a part of the workshop, we encourage the community staff to share the level of service goals they've come up with their users and ask for input. And then the last of the required meetings is a wrap-up presentation. And this presentation is typically done by either the consultant, the municipal staff most involved in the project, or a combination. The audience for this presentation is the municipal management and the public. The presentation is an opportunity for the management to gain a better understanding of the valuable assets they own and are responsible for. There are typically a few aha moments during this presentation. DES attendance at this presentation allows us to stress the importance of continuing the work that has been started and to promote the good work that's already been done by the staff. And although we started the asset management loan forgiveness program in 2013, it took 2 years to have applications start coming in. And during that time, we were doing a lot of outreach and education to communities. We were also learning a lot about asset management ourselves. The first applications came in 2015, then the floodgates opened in 2016, and they haven't yet closed. Word is getting out there. So that $3.3 million shown on this slide may not seem that significant to some of the larger states, but it is a very significant investment in New Hampshire, especially when you consider that $3.3 million represents 110 bites of that $30,000 apple. Then when we look at the map this way, we still have a long way to go. We want to get everyone on board with asset management in New Hampshire. And so far, we've worked with 43 of our 135 sewer communities and 22 stormwater systems. Of those 22, there is some overlap for communities working on both wastewater and stormwater, with a handful being in communities that have stormwater assets only. So how's New Hampshire DES helping communities turn problems into opportunities? Well, all of this work does that. But if you consider asset management to be the umbrella for effective utility management, then tools like energy efficiency and planning help you develop a more effective umbrella. DES is currently actively funding asset management, energy efficiency, and planning. These are all the tools that communities need to be able to make cost-effective decisions in the management of their water infrastructure. Since wastewater treatment plants are typically the largest energy user for any municipality, we've started making a significant investment to help them become more energy efficient. We started this work with a grant from U.S. Department of Energy, and we've continued the work using Clean Water SRF funding for both comprehensive energy audits as well as incentives for implementation of the energy audit findings. We're also encouraging communities to move forward with wastewater and stormwater planning efforts through another loan forgiveness program. The planning funding is very competitive and can include things like CIP development, which is a great use of the data generated from an asset management program. Integrated planning, long-term control plans, facility plans, vulnerability assessments, climate adaptation plans, to name a few, are also considered eligible planning projects for this funding, and all build on that asset management program foundation. So going forward, as I mentioned, we want to expand our program to really help communities develop more tools that make that asset management umbrella even more effective. Over the next year or two, we hope to be developing programs to assist our communities with understanding and addressing their vulnerabilities, helping them with power resiliency and flood resiliency. Then going forward a little bit more, a big part of the long-term cultural shift that all of this work under the asset management umbrella is leading to is shifting the mindset from wastewater to a mindset of resources. This cultural shift is critical if we're to start valuing wastewater infrastructure assets and the people who manage those assets in the manner they should be valued. Wastewater treatment was one of the most important improvements to public health ever, and we need to remember that. In New Hampshire, we will need to make that same one community at a time approach to educate and increase awareness to succeed with this overall cultural shift. As Franny mentioned, we'll be taking questions at the end of the presentations, but here's my contact information if you would like to reach out with any questions or learn more about our programs. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Franny.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay. So now we're going to introduce our next speakers from Florida. First, we'll have Timothy Banks of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, followed by Ben Lewis and Diana Stewart from the Florida Rural Water Association, who serves as a contractor to Florida DEP to help develop their asset management program. So Tim Banks has been with the Florida DEP for 32 years. He started with the department in 1988 as the last grants were made in the old construction grants program, and the first loans were made in the CWSRF. In 1997, he was tasked with Florida's Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program, and for the past 12 years has been the administrator of their CWSRF. Just give me one moment here. Making Tim a presenter to share his screen. And I'm also going to introduce Ben Lewis and Diana Stewart right now. So Ben Lewis is the program manager with Florida Rural Water Association, as well as the supervisor for the asset management program and groundwater and source water protection program. Ben has been in the water and wastewater industry for 36 years and started his career with the United States Air Force. Ben is a licensed A water operator and a licensed C wastewater operator. He's also a certified stormwater inspector. Ben has his utility management certification through National Rural Water Association and has just completed the Florida State University Certified Public Manager's course. He and his wife have 5 amazing children, which are all grown, and 8 grandchildren. And after Ben, we'll be hearing from Diana Jo Stewart, who began her career with the Florida, with the Department of Environmental Protection and worked in the State Revolving Fund program for 9 years before moving to Florida Rural Water Association. During her 15 years with FRWA, she has worn several hats from trainer to source water specialist and now asset management utility specialist. So take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Franny, and good afternoon, everyone. Adding to what Sharon just said, for years SRF programs have been providing loans to systems for rehabbing facilities as they wear out. For larger systems, these rehab projects were necessary after 20 years, more or less, but for smaller financially disadvantaged systems, these projects were often necessary much sooner, and in some cases they were failing halfway through their expected useful life, and often due to lack of maintenance. To compound the problem, these systems were failing with no funds set aside to make the necessary repairs. In response to that, we started encouraging asset management by sponsoring free workshops throughout the state. The message from these workshops may or may not have resulted in any local governments adopting asset management plans. We had no way of knowing, but the participation by small systems was very limited. In 2014, to incentivize the process, we began offering a 0.1% interest rate break if an asset management plan had been adopted by the borrower. And we started seeing a few plans here and there. Some attributed it to the break on the SRF loan. However, the response was not exactly overwhelming. More recently, as Sharon just mentioned, WRDA kind of forced this issue with the FSP requirement for at least the project being funded. However, for small systems, we still didn't feel like that was enough, so we made some revisions to rules to take the carrot and the stick approach. To be eligible for a state grant program or for principal forgiveness in the loan program, an adopted and implemented asset management plan is now required to receive either one of those. The grant or principal forgiveness is rescinded if the asset management plan is not adopted and implemented prior to the first repayment. Since these financially disadvantaged systems were the least likely to be able to afford to develop an asset management plan on their own, we contracted with the Florida Rural Water Association to create a program that would develop plans for these systems. Later, we added the drinking water programs to the mix, and to date, the Rural Water Association has completed plans for 53 local governments, and they are currently working with 21 more. Initially, these plans were more or less paper documents generated in part using EPA's Checkup Program for Small Systems, or CUPS. We did have some success. The tiny town of Jennings was our first plan, and we do currently have a construction project to correct an inflow and infiltration problem that was identified in that plan. However, we felt like adding the GIS functionality at a low cost would go a long way in getting the small systems to engage. So we contracted with a firm to evaluate the various asset management plan software systems on the market, but we really didn't find anything that was suitable for these systems, primarily due to the high cost. The contractor did find one company that was willing to work with us to create an inexpensive system on a GIS platform that would also include the best features in CUPS. We had previously set a target of $20 per month for this system, and Diamond Maps agreed to at a base rate of 1 seat for $20 a month. That monthly cost does go up depending on the number of connections the system has, but the maximum cost is $75 per month. Since the initial creation of that program, the company has been working with us to improve it ever since. Diamond Maps now has some really nice features, as you can see here, and as Ben will demonstrate in a minute, but this software still lacked one key element. It didn't have anything to do with the financial package that we needed, because the owner of Diamond Maps didn't feel comfortable with that aspect. So we contracted with Reftalis, which is a national company, to develop a program that would communicate with Diamond Maps to bring in the operations and maintenance costs, the capital projects, repair and replacement costs, and would allow simple, easy to use screens to add projected revenues and expenditures. We named this module RevPlan. With this addition, the appropriate rates can be determined based on various funding scenarios with and without outside funding sources. As Sharon said, if you ask questions in the question box, we will attempt to answer them after the presentation is complete. But if you have specific questions for me, my contact information is here. Now I'll turn it over to Ben Lewis for a quick demonstration of Diamond Maps, and Diana Stewart with we'll talk about RevPlan.
Thanks, Tim. And as Tim mentioned in his presentation, here in Florida, one of the tools that we use for asset management is Diamond Maps. As you can see on the screen, here is one of the maps for one of the cities that we worked with. Diamond Maps is a low-cost GIS CMMS cloud-based system where the system personnel can actually mark their assets in the field on the plan. When they work in the office, they can draw lines as well. Diamond Maps runs in your browser on any phone, tablet, PC. As long as there's internet, there's nothing to install. As you can see the assets on the map, you can add or take off layers. So you can take off anything you want. It can get crowded. If you don't, you can also have work orders can be written, and they can either be printed or you can issue them by email to a system personnel. And each asset can have a work order. You can have that work order be a one-time event. So if you have a leak or a repair, you can issue the work order, send it to them in the field. Or it could be a reoccurring event like valve exercising or flushing. Both work orders and the assets themselves have a note section that logs the time, the date, and the personnel. And those are permanent records. Those stay in the records entirely. You can import shape files, CSV files, or KML files from other sources. So if you have other files that you've gotten or people have already GIS some things, you can bring those into Diamond Maps, or you can start scratch on the map and map out the entire system. You can also take these files and you can share them with other folks. So if you have engineers that want to see your shape files, you can import them here. You can import them or you can export them out to your engineers or to other people that need this. You can draw points and lines on your assets, including you can name the asset, including your fire hydrant, manholes, valves, meters. So if you click on one, you can change the name, you can put the type. There's all types of information here. Design life, when they were installed. So you can customize the information you want inside here. Diamond Maps has built-in Google Maps and Street Views to allow you to start drawing with your mouse. You can see the layers here. We have aerial, roads, terrain. We use auto select, so as you zoom in, it will actually change the background for you. You can add pictures. You can take a picture in the field and add those, upload a PDF or a Word document. You can add Excel spreadsheets, SOPs, maintenance logs. Some of the benefits also is actually creating a maintenance plan or a flushing schedule. You can do valve exercising, as I stated before, put a meter reading list in there for new people, different routes for folks to learn. One of the things I like about Diamond Maps is you can keep up with your leaks. So you can map out where you have a leak on a street, and you can keep up with those, determine if you're having issues on those streets. Maybe that pipe or that line needs to be replaced. Also will help you to figure out which valves you need to isolate for a leak. Are those valves, where are they located? Have they been exercised? You'll have records for them. As Tim mentioned earlier, this is a low cost system. It's probably one of the best programs for the cost. You can get that single user account for $19 a month, or you can get an unlimited account where it's based off of your meter. So it could be as low as $15 all the way up, and it's based off of your meters, 250 meters all the way up to 10,000 meters. The one good thing is there is no contract with this system. So if you decide you didn't want Diamond Maps after you've done it, you can still get your information. You can export it out and collect all those shape files. Diamond Maps works with our other financial tool, which, as Tim mentioned, is Revolving. And I'm going to turn it over to Diana to talk about that tool.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to wait for the screen to catch up. Okay. As Ben and Tim mentioned, the idea behind RevPlan is to provide an online tool for small water utilities to achieve financial resiliency. RevPlan can assist users in identifying the various utility funding requirements over a 5 to 20-year planning window. These funding requirements include the capital financing plan, operating costs, and the debt service. In order for systems to set a budget, they need to know what assets are in their system and the cost to replace when they fail. RevPlan works with Diamond Maps to do just that by importing the assets and looking at the condition, design life, and replacement cost fields entered for each asset in Diamond Maps. I'm going to scroll down and go to the wastewater, since we are talking about clean water. We can see here, after we import, what assets, the percentage of assets that need to be replaced immediately. We can also come up here to the capital improvement plan, and we can see the cost to maintain the system. Now, after populating each of the data entry screens, and I'll scroll through these just so you can get an idea of what they are. We go to the Output tab. Now here, systems can show their elected officials where they stand on the existing rates structure, The user can also identify any rate adjustments necessary to meet the utility funding requirements. RevPlan allows the user to see the impact rate increases will have on their ratepayers. If we choose here and change the average use, we see here the rates increase over a 10-year period for the wastewater, drinking water, and this is the combined rate. I'm going to scroll back up here to let you see. RevPlan will also give you a guideline for setting an annual budget. We can see here historically, this was the actual expenses for 2019 fiscal year. This is what we've budgeted for 2020. And with the CPI being set at 3%, we see what the increases will need to be over the next 10 years in this model. Franny, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, just one moment here. All right, everyone, as we get this full screen mode fixed. Okay, so I think now is a good time to go on to the questions. Let's see. So I know there were some questions for New Hampshire and Florida. Let's see here. And they may not have been shared with everybody. All right. So Sharon, if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience here, they would like to know, how long did it take to develop the program in New Hampshire?
That's been a continuous improvement process. And I would say it took probably 3 or 4 years to really get a good feel for what was working and not working. And the key for us was to not be afraid to make changes based on feedback from communities and consultants. We would meet with consulting firms on a regular basis and kind of what's working, what's not, and incorporate all that information into any changes we made.
Okay, let's see what other questions we've got. Okay, do any of the panelists have case studies of savings to treatment plants or municipality as the result of asset management? So Sharon or Tim, do you have any of those case studies that you could talk about or share later or expand upon?
We don't have case studies yet about money being saved in New Hampshire. Most of the communities realize that their rates have been set lower than they should be. So a lot of times, one of the first results of developing an asset management program is a justification for rate changes, usually rate increases. So it's more, the savings would be in more fewer emergency projects because they're planned, they're taken care of, they know where the hot spots are, where the issues are, but we don't have case studies developed.
I would concur with that. Our program is really too new to be showing the savings at this time. And like Sharon said, the rates are probably going to go up and the expenses are probably going to go up initially. The case studies for project savings are going to be over the next, say, 10, 15 years. At the end of that period, I would expect the savings to be quite substantial.
I would agree with that.
Okay, let's see what other questions we've got here. Okay, I'm assuming that this question goes out to both states. Did you pilot the effort to gauge interest before you launched the program?
Sharon, you want to go first?
Franny, can you repeat the question? I was having trouble finding it.
I'm a little unclear. So it says, did you pilot the effort to gauge interest before you launched the program?
I think it sounds like kind of both Florida and New Hampshire got in right as asset management was becoming kind of the buzzword of, and people were just figuring out that, oh, this is something we need to do. So it was kind of, the whole country was moving forward on it at the same time.
With us, the large systems were progressing fairly nicely with asset management, but the small systems, like I guess what mostly New Hampshire has,
Yeah.
weren't doing much of anything with it. We finally decided, because we were providing state grants to replace projects that we had built 10 years prior, we had had enough, and we were going to require them to implement an asset management program, whether they liked it or not. But that's, again, why we went through Florida Rural Water, to provide that service for them. And as far as piloting it, we went through some trials and tribulations. The initial plans were, like I said, paper documents, and they weren't being used very well. So we've gone through a lot of different iterations on this, and I think what we have now is something that is very useful, and we've had really good feedback on it over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for New Hampshire. And no, we didn't officially do a pilot. We opened it up for everyone, but we also developed our program based on what was working and what wasn't working. And Tim, to your point, with those kind of reports that were sitting on the shelf, we started having a lot of discussions about asset management plan versus asset management program.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have pushed the program. It's like, just remove the plan from your vocabulary.
Same here. We were seeing them, we were afraid they would be sitting on the shelves, and for the most part, we were right.
Yeah, yep. And that's something we've added. One of the requirements for ours is an implementation plan, meaning explain to us, how are you going to keep this program going forward? Who's going to be responsible for implementing different parts of it, and just moving it forward?
Huge concern for us as well in Florida. And one of the problems we've seen is city managers in particular tend to be almost transient. And one city manager will not really educate the next one for obvious reasons on the importance of asset management. So we have to start over in cases.
Yes, yeah, ours are mostly elected officials. So they're volunteers that manage our municipalities. Well, the cities are our city managers, but smaller towns are elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we've got a couple of more questions, if you don't mind. New Hampshire. Under the condition assessment phase of asset management, does New Hampshire fund sewer cleaning and CCTV?
If it is in the scope for the asset management program development, we will include that as part of the program, the principal forgiveness, because it is a really good way to get condition assessment. So yes, it is eligible.
And how many staff does the New Hampshire program have, if you can answer that question, Sharon?
How many?
How many staff does the New Hampshire program have? There's a question about that here, if you can answer it.
They still didn't. How many?
How many staff does the New Hampshire program have?
Yes. Well, for wastewater, it was, until a couple months ago, it was just me. Stormwater, we have 2 people. So I just hired another person, and then we have 1 in drinking water. And we all have crazy
And I think we've got time for one more. Tim, this is for you. It says, I hear CUPS is not going to be supported in the future. Is that true?
As far as I know, it is. I think EPA might be working on a new asset management program, but I haven't heard much on that recently. And that's why we went out on our own and developed something that was going to be, that we would have control over, let's put it that way.
And Sharon, would you mind answering one more question that we've got here?
No?
Okay. Are communities in New Hampshire that have adopted asset management plans sticking with them, in your opinion, or according to what you have?
Some are and some aren't. And that's, we're figuring out ways to really encourage the continued use. So it takes a champion in each community.
Great. So I think it sounds like we're at a good stopping point here. Thank you everyone for logging in. Thank you Sharon, Tim, Ben, and Diana for joining us today and helping to run this webinar, and to all the participants for listening in. Just today's presentation is going to be made available on EPA's Clean Water SRF website within a few weeks. And we can make sure that that link goes out to you as soon as it's posted. So thanks again, everyone. This ends our webinar for today. Really appreciate you joining us, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Franny.
Thank you, Franny.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.